You know, in all honesty, I'm not sure anybody actually cares about David Hogg or Kenyatta. I'm not sure the other individual is. But the Democrats, the DNC, held a procedural vote to remove David Hogg as vice chair. You see, David Hogg told a bunch of incumbent Democrats, we are going to primary you. He said we need to stop being a party that just, it's like walking on eggshells around. Now, I think the dude is what's the right word? He has no idea what he's talking about half the time. Like when it came to Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and in order to maintain the woke cult-like adherence to his orthodoxy, he says he was not an MS-13 gang member, and you damn well know it. Oh boy. You know, my friends, we're planning a LibVCon trivia night for Culture War Live, where we're going to dedicate a portion of the show to a trivia game show where liberals and conservatives must answer questions about politics. And an example of one of the questions we'd use is going to be, in which year was Kilmar Abrego Garcia adjudicated as an MS-13 gang member? And, of course, the liberals are going to be like, that's a trick question. He never was. And the answer, of course, is 2019. The answer was 2019. A judge found him to be a member of MS-13. We are not saying, we are not asserting whether it's true or not. The question was, when was it adjudicated as such? You see, these people don't know what they're talking about half the time. But anyway, I digress. The funny thing about the story is that the Democrats are in, well, a civil war. There, I said it. But the thing is, they need to unify around a core set of ideals that's going to win them the midterm elections and win them 2028. And it appears they don't have any. Not even David Hogg could try to come in and say, let's try to win back young men. They were like, nah, you got to go. That's funny. Not even David Hogg could make it in. The DNC is garbage. It's always been garbage. But these people, you know, I'll tell you, I feel bad for David Hogg a little bit. Look, these young people, they're naive. I remember when Bernie Sanders was running and I was all like, oh boy, Bernie Sanders. And then the superdelegates came in and said, nah. I remember Obama. And I think, what was it like? Hillary could have won, but the superdelegates said, nah, we're going to go with Obama instead. And she was all pissed. The Democratic Party doesn't actually have a democratic process for elections. They choose who will win, who's going to win through resources, and then they can put their thumb on the scale with superdelegates. People who get to vote just because they're in positions of authority and elite power. Well, see, people like David Hogg don't really understand how the system works. They think the Democratic Party will allow you to vote your way in. The funny thing is, the Republican Party largely does. I mean, they'll try and stop you. They'll play dirty games, not like the Democrats do with superdelegates. So Donald Trump actually ended up winning, and they were pissed about it, but he still did. Look at Bernie Sanders. Yeah, he ain't winning nothing. The moment Bernie walked up and said, I'd like to be president, they were like, yeah, that's literally never going to happen. Here's a story from the New York Times. DNC takes step to void the election of Hogg and Kenyatta as vice chairs. The Credentials Committee of the DNC voted on Monday to void the results of the internal party vote that made David Hogg a party vice chair, ruling that the election had not followed proper parliamentary procedures. The decision, which came after roughly 3 hours of internal debate and one tie vote, will put the issue before the full body of the Democratic National Committee. It must decide whether to force Mr. Hogg and a second vice chair, Malcolm Kenyatta, to run again in another election later this year. Hogg, an outspoken survivor of Parkland, this we know, plans to spend up to $20 million through another organization he heads, Leaders We Deserve, on primary campaigns against incumbent Democrats. Ken Martin, the party chairman, has said it is inappropriate for Mr. Hogg to intervene in primaries while serving as a party official. That's correct. And has recommended changing the party's bylaws to force him to sign a neutrality pledge. You see, this is the funny thing. Maybe David Hogg really does get it. He's like, once I get into the DNC, I will overtly tell the candidates what they can and cannot do, and we will pledge money to destroy you. I think maybe he does get it. They're going to say that Mr. Hogg's plans to engage in the ruling committee on Monday was not technically related to Hogg's plans to engage in primaries. Instead, it was the result of a complaint by Kaylin Free, one of the losing candidates in the vice chair race. Ms. Free said the party had wrongly combined two separate questions into a single vote, putting at a disadvantage the female candidates because of the party's gender parity rules. In a statement, Mr. Hogg acknowledged the decision was made on procedural grounds, but said, "It is also impossible to ignore the broader context of my work to reform the party, which loomed large over this vote. The DNC has pledged to remove me, and this vote has provided an avenue to fast-track that effort." Indeed, they did. Yep. Because was it Dick Durbin out of Illinois? He's retiring. Yeah, because David Hogg said, we're going to come after all you guys. And he's probably thinking, I'm going to leave on a high note. Not going to stick around to see if they try and destroy my credibility or my background, impugn my honor. I'm just getting out. And I think the institution of the DNC said, we do not want this. We want to keep the power we have, and we don't want young upstarts coming in. So here's the funny thing. They can come up with any reason, whenever they want, to force a new election on David Hogg. Now, if David Hogg's move is unpopular for these primaries, he will lose come the next election. They didn't vote to outright remove him, by the way. They did vote to begin the process of removing him. Mr. Kenyatta expressed frustration on social media, both at the committee's decision and all the attention on Mr. Hogg, noting that he had won 298 votes to 214 and a half. You get a half vote for Mr. Hogg. He called the decision a slap in my face. And so the process was not about Mr. Hogg, even though he clearly wants it to be. In a statement, Mr. Martin said, "I am disappointed to learn that before I became chair, there was a procedural error in the February vice chair elections. The Credentials Committee has issued their recommendations, and I trust the DNC members will carefully review the committee resolution and resolve this matter fairly." Mr. Hogg's intention to engage in primaries was not the subject of the discussion on Monday, which turned on arcane parliamentary procedures, blah, blah, blah. This is about fairness and making sure that 3 women and the voting members of the DNC are not disenfranchised, Ms. Free said in a statement before the meeting, during which she enlisted a parliamentary expert to plead her case. Now, the question I have is, what were the questions that got lumped together, and how does that disadvantage women? And why then do these women get to have a new vote? You see how it works with DEI, David? You see how DEI works? Bye-bye. Leading up to the vote, the Credentials Committee had appeared torn on what to do. An initial resolution from Christine Pelosi, the daughter of Nancy Pelosi, seeking to dismiss the complaint resulted in a tie vote. A second resolution calling for a new election with the same candidates who participated in February was eventually approved. You see that? You see that? An initial resolution was seeking to dismiss the complaint, and it got a tie. And so they caved and said, okay, fine. We'll have a new election. We'll avoid the last one. Why? Because the women didn't win, David. You know, what's funny is if David lost and then filed a complaint, they would not entertain it. They'd say, no, you're a man. You're an oppressor, David. You oppressed these women. So I want to say this to David Hogg. You are an oppressor, you evil white man, and you should resign immediately, because that's what DEI is all about. Why are you going to force these other people to go through all this process when you could simply resign your seat to this woman who deserves it more? You know, I'm going to give David Hogg this one. He is correct when he said that the Democrats need to try and get back young men. That is fair. That is true. But it ain't going to happen, because when David Hogg says, let's do it, a bunch of women file a complaint and then vote to hold a new election to essentially remove him from the DNC. So, you know, goodbye. These are your rules. These are the rules you want to abide by. An interesting phenomenon that we're seeing right now. Gen Z men went, I think it was like 56 to 42 for Trump. And Gen Z women went 58 to 41 for Kamala. We are literally going to see a female Democratic Party and a male Republican Party in Gen Z. It's hilarious. There will be very few men in the Democrats, very few women on the Republican side, and it's literally going to be men versus women. Here's the problem. And I know it's offensive to a lot of feminists, but cry more. Men don't have biological clocks. I believe the phenomenon we will see is that these Gen Z and millennial women are going to start shifting rightward. Not all of them. Some of them will stay childless cat ladies. And I'm not saying to be mean. Like literally they'll get cats and they'll stay childless. And the women who don't want to be childless and they want to have families, they're going to keep running into guys who are like, I'm not going to have a family with a liberal woman. Bye. And some of these women are going to change their views because they will run out of time if they don't. Whereas a guy is going to be like, look, I don't want to have a kid at 50, but if I have to, I have to. Thus, it's nature. Cry more about it. I'm going to wrap it up there. Stay tuned. We got more segments coming up for you throughout the day. And you can follow me on X and Instagram at Timcast. And we'll see you all in the next bit.